Good afternoon, Emerald City Comic-Con. You do better than that. Good afternoon, Emerald City Comic-Con.
There it is. That was better.
So I had to go moderate a panel. So I had your loveliness up here on stage. This is Red. Give it up for Red, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for the claps. It's okay.
And the fans were saying, don't bring me back up here. So we're both coming up here to introduce. How many Star Trek fans out here? I bet there's more male Star Trek fans out here. Let's hear it for the guys. Star Trek fans.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I get the ladies. Can I get some ladies up? Oh, yeah. My girls. Good job.
Guys, we only have one last chance. Guys, Star Trek fans. I don't know, Red.
Okay, ladies, come on. Come on. There it is. They're so good. They're so good. You bow down. That is right.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome your panel moderator, Mr. Walter Koenig, Mr. David Boze from KTTH. Good luck, David.
My first memories of Star Trek are with my grandfather, my late grandfather. I'd sit on his lap. He'd have a big bowl of popcorn and ice cream, and I remember it inspiring me in terms of science fiction and fantasy, and I just wanted to imagine all these different worlds where nobody had ever gone before. And then when I got older and I got into radio, I had a chance to speak to a lot of scientists. And it's amazing how many different people will cite Star Trek as the thing that inspired them to real-life accomplishment in technology and aviation and space exploration. There's something magical about the world that Gene Roddenberry created, the scripts, and also something about the cast, something about the original Star Trek cast, and it makes each of them royalty when it comes to the acting world and the science fiction world. Please welcome Walter Koenig. Let's have a seat, Walter.
I'm going to stand for a while.
Well, if you're going to stand, I'm going to too, because
No, I think I'll sit. No.
I don't know what it is. It's always these guys that give me a hard time. I used to butcher Walter's name for 35 years. I thought it was Koenig. And then just before you were on the radio show, I learned it was Koenig. But that's okay because you were always having fun with accents and things on the air. And one of the things that struck me is here you were playing a Russian in the midst of the Cold War. And obviously you wrote about your father's history, left leanings. How did that impact fans at the time? And when the wall fell, when things opened up, was there kind of an outreach from Russian fans that was special for you compared to the other cast?
I'll begin at the end. My character was so kind of apolitical, you know? He didn't really engender any kind of reaction on that level. My fans were from 8 to 13 years old. They wrote in pencil on lined paper, you know, and they thought I was groovy. So that's about as far as that went. So that was never a problem. I just think, you know, the people out there who were anti-Russian just kind of ignored the fact because, as I say, the character was not very threatening. And you had another question.
Well, yeah, I was wondering if, well, let me skip ahead for a moment and go to the ear question that I asked you a couple of days ago. When it comes to Wrath of Khan, I thought you had the most memorable scene in the movie with the little earwig creature going in for the mind control. How much of your real ear had that slimy thing in it?
Well, because of the danger involved in that scene, that was, you know, after all, that was a stunt bug. You know? So this ear has been reconstructed. No, they had the little thing, whatever the hell it was, dipped in goo, and they had it threaded through my helmet. They had drew a hole in my helmet, and so it was on my face. And there was a guy standing above me, pulling it, you know, and so it came up my face. Now, when it came actually to the time when it crawled in my ear, at that juncture, what did we do? Oh, we went to a close-up of a sculpted ear that wasn't mine, and with a hole in the back. And then we pulled it into my ear, again, on this fine filament through that little hole. And as far as what we did when it came out of my ear, we did this in Marin County, you know, with all of what's his name, the guy from Star Wars. George Lucas, yeah. So what they did was they put me on a bench that was covered in the same material that the floor was when I fell down initially, but it was, you know, several hundred miles away. When I fell, that was on the lot at Paramount. This was on a bench in Marin County, and again, they drilled a hole in the bench, so they could have it. They could start to pull it out of my ear, but so they had an establishing shot of it starting to come out of my ear, and then they cut to yet another shot, which was not to size. This was a disproportionately larger ear, so that they could show the bug as being bigger and more threatening. So the last shot was actually this large sculpted ear and the bug being pulled out. So it wasn't very painful at all.
You wrote some notes for Wrath of Khan and sent them to the director. They were published in your autobiography. What kind of changes did your writings make to Wrath of Khan?
I don't remember. I do remember that that Harv Bennett, our producer, I can't remember why he did this. Oh, I know why. The first thing I did when I read the script was I was shocked that they had Spock dying in the second act. You know, this is one of your two main characters. It just doesn't happen that way unless you're going to do flashbacks. So I called him and said, I got to talk to you, Mr. Bennett. He said, I don't talk to actors before we shoot. I said, it's not about acting. So I came in and I talked to him and the regular. He was the executive producer and the regular producer, and I said, you can't have Spock dying in the second act. And I was very emphatic. And I guess they were impressed enough to do a rewrite. So when the rewrite came back, I realized that Khan had lines like, I remember. He didn't remember me because I wasn't in the first time that he played Khan. I wasn't in the show. But you think I was going to tell them that? I mean, when it's a case of professional responsibility and ethics and personal survival, we all know where I went. In fact, I started to make up something. I did a lot of conventions after that where people say, feeling very proud of themselves, people would get up and say, how could Spock have recognized you in Star Trek II when you weren't in Star Trek II? Very defiantly, waiting for me to fumble and trip over my own feet, trying to come up with an explanation. And I said, on the contrary, Chekhov was in Star Trek II. He was working on the third deck behind the boiler room. And he was ill with a condition called Malapropsky's malady, which was kind of a 23rd century version of Montezuma's Revenge. And he was ensconced in the bathroom and had been there for hours and hours, where poor Mr. Khan, his genetically engineered kidneys about to explode, pounded pitifully on the bathroom door, begging to be let in, until finally the door opened. Chekhov stepped out and he said, "Your face, I will never forget."
Is there any other of the original series storylines that you wish you had seen continued into film?
Actually, I think they did a better job are you talking about my character, or you're just talking about this?
In general, either way.
I really didn't think too much in general. I was thinking about my character. I don't know. I thought the story, City on the Edge of Forever, was such a terrific story. I don't know what else they could have done. It had a perfect ending, you know, very tragic, very sad ending. But I so enjoyed that if they could have come up with something additionally for that story, it might be very, very interesting. I don't really. That's a good question, because I don't really remember thinking about that. So let's go on to the next one.
Well, I read your notes that detailed your vision for an end to much of the main cast, a death for Scotty and Uhura and Captain Kirk, and ultimately I think it was Spock and Bones that would end up walking away after a big battle with what you described as an alien that was basically the precursor to Alien, basically Prometheus kind of story. Looking back, is there a way that you'd like to see Chekhov have ended on film?
Well, I don't think so, because I think that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do all of the films and attend conventions like this. But I thought that if a character was going to be killed off, I would certainly like it to be better constructed and better done than what they did to Captain Kirk.
Oh, amen to that.
I mean, that was such a sorry excuse for an ending. You had to know, and I mean this seriously, you had to know that Berman didn't give a damn, you know, about our cast, and particularly about Kirk. I mean, he took the most undramatic, non-lyric, unemotional way he could possibly do it. It was really, I felt, an insult. I mean, Kirk, you've got to give Kirk an ending, you know, due him, and that wasn't done.
In my mind, he's still in that nebula because he didn't want to leave, and that was just a clone Kirk that ended up falling off that that platform there. Tell us about your venture into Babylon 5 and the reaction there.
Well, Babylon 5 is unquestionably the most fun I've had as an actor on television. There's certain values that that involve my experience on Star Trek that I'm extremely pleased about. I'm extremely pleased that we've had such an enduring and supportive audience for Star Trek. It's really quite remarkable, and it's meant a great deal to me personally and vocationally that Star Trek has endured for such a long period of time, and it has led to some other professional experiences. But for the most part, you know, I was sitting up there and hitting the green button when I felt envious, and the purple button when I was in a rage, you know, and the blue button when I was depressed, you know. So there wasn't a whole lot for Chekhov to do. Aye, aye, sir. Aye, aye, sir. Aye, aye, sir. You know, it's just so many ways you can do that. So it wasn't aesthetically as rewarding as it might otherwise have been.
I don't think anybody else could have said enemy vessel ahead and been taken seriously.
Yeah, that was certainly my major achievement in But B5 was a terrific experience in almost every way it could have been. I loved working with the actors. It was really a troupe. It wasn't the caste system. When we were doing Star Trek, it was really a caste system. And that was much a fault of the generation as it was anything else. And there are other things that it was, but certainly the fact that we had 3 actors who were given credit before the titles, and the others were weaved in to the end titles between the guest actors, you know, and which showed it reflected a certain lack of respect, but not vindictively. It was just the way things went. And we were there, and it was understood that we were moving furniture, and not moving furniture, but we were moving furniture. And Bill felt that way very much, that there were 3 stars, and then there was the rest of us. So he wasn't there to support us and be a voice on our side, but. The people on B5 were just terrific. Bruce and Jerry and Mira and everybody, they were just terrific. From the first time I stepped on the soundstage, they were contemporaries and peers, and I was one of the guys. And certainly some of that had to do with having been on Star Trek for so long. You acquire a kind of patina that goes with being on a show that long. So that's true. But everybody, just the way they conducted themselves with each other, was I thought quite wonderful. And you grow to appreciate something like that when you had a situation where there were frustrations involved with relationships with other cast members. Additionally, every time I came on the show, I had something to do. Which was so nice, and I felt significant and important to this story. And as a consequence, I also got along very well with Joe Straczynski and the other members of the staff, the production staff. So it was just a great experience. I loved being part of it.
In your autobiography, you describe being a very insecure young man, not sure what your abilities are, but you loved acting. In fact, you describe your greatest performance as being 12 years old and playing a king of some kind. And then you end up at acting school with James Caan, Dabney Coleman, and Christopher Lloyd. Tell us about the experience working with them, or learning with them.
Well, I'll tell you an experience that is interesting because it doesn't include any of them. I was broke. I was in drama school and I was totally broke. I was living literally on $75 a month, which was tuna fish sandwiches every single day. And then I had a friend who worked on construction, and I'd known him since we were about 8 years old. His name was Peter McGee. And I went to Peter one day and I said, "What's the chance of one of those heavy 8-pound rivets falling from the building?" And he says, "That happens all the time." And I said, "Is it possible that it could land somewhere where it could hit somebody?" He says, "Yeah." He said, "Yes." I said, "Okay, let me think about this." So I went to Dabney, who was very upset. "No, you can't do anything like that." No, he was very stern about it. Jimmy said, "What?" And Chris, who just laughed. So I went to a first-year student. Now, you're all way too young to know this guy, but he was a beat poet in the village, and he was named Moondoggy, and he was also a first-year student at the Playhouse. And I asked him. I said, "Would you be my eyewitness for $100? Because I'm going to try to pull off a little scam." And he said, "Hey man, that's groovy, yeah." have some marijuana first. So, to this day, I can't believe some of the things I did at that time. It could really be interpreted as being very self-destructive, but I thought it was kind of an adventure. So I went to my friend Peter, and I asked him to get me one of these rivets, and he did. And the three of us, Peter, Moondoggy, whose real name was Hugh Romney, and I, when we met for lunch, Peter slipped me the rivet under the table, and what I had rehearsed with Hugh was that I was going to step off the curb, and he was going to be behind me and see me fall, and then I had the rivet under my armpit, and I was just going to let it. I had a jacket on. I was going to just let it fall, and I was going to scream. So that was the plan, but this cool guy, Hugh Moondoggy, he panicked, and his job was simply to walk behind me. And I came out of the bar because I cut my. Oh, I forgot to tell you that. I went into a bar with a newspaper and I cut my cheek, so that I have some evidence of the thing hitting me. Is this neurotic or what? And but he got nervous and he jumped off into the street before me. So he was halfway across 6th Avenue because that's where we were doing this. When I started across the street, so I had no other choice. So I did my scream and I fell down and the blood was dripping off my chin. And he came running back and he looked at me and said, "Somebody do something. Just don't stand there." Now I really was screaming. I was really saying, "Oh my God, this guy is so bad." But they ended taking me up to the hospital in the Bronx where my brother was an intern. I hadn't told my brother that I was going to do this. But the end of the story is, they did all these. I did tell him when I got up there, and I said, "Norm, I'm faking all this." He said, "Oh shit, we got to go through with it." So I had all the X-rays taken and all that stuff, and then I was sent to an attorney because that was the whole idea, to go to an attorney. And the attorney said, if you had stayed out of school for a couple of weeks after you had this accident, we could probably get a lot more money for you. But I had to go back because we were having a showcase, and I needed to be available. So I got a sum of money that would put me in jail if they knew. It wasn't a vast amount, but it was enough, to do that. And of course, by now, Hugh was ecstatic and says, "Well, we can do this in Chicago. We can do this in Boston." And I bought a car. I bought a really terrible little English car called an Anglia, which cost me the amount of money that I got. Within 6 months, I had to throw it into the car. Oh, so that is really my first experience with theater. It was street theater, and the first time I actually had an audience to perform before.
I'm going to ask one more question, but I'd ask folks in the audience who want to ask a question get lined up at the two microphones here on either aisle. You have a Kickstarter project coming up. Tell us what that's all about.
Well, I'm not sure I know what it's all about. There's one called Cowboys and Engines. And somebody said that was insulting. It's not insulting. You're not going it's not cowboys and Indians, it's cowboys and engines. Two different words entirely, But it's, what punk something, what do they call it?
Steampunk?
Yeah. So it's about the Old West, and at the same time, there's an involvement of a professor who has created a kind of a time machine, and I play the professor. It's not a very big part, but it's interesting. It's more interesting than the roles that I have been offered over the internet. I've been offered some roles that were just awful roles. I mean, I was offered one where it was going to be one of the principal roles, but it required that I have my head cut off and that a dog eats it. And I said, I don't want to be in a movie where a dog eats my head. That's a little too grotesque for me. Then there was another one that I was told by a couple of the actors who'd signed up for it. And again, the producer wanted to give me one of the leads. And he says, it's very funny. It's a very funny movie. And I read it the second time, and I didn't see any humor in it. I didn't see anything that was remotely funny. And I called up Robert Picardo, who's a bright guy, and I know he had been invited to participate. And and unbeknownst to the producer, he had already in his own mind turned it down. And I asked him if he thought it was funny. He says, no, there's nothing funny here. So it was another kind of role I was offered. And then I was offered above the title movie, independent again, that made a political statement that I couldn't tolerate. And if it was a political statement that ultimately is shown to be wrong, shown to be reactionary, then I could have done it. But this guy who wrote it really supported this statement, and the message of the movie was go away from this movie thinking that this is the way things should be. So I had to turn that one down. I have no idea where we started with this.
Let's go on here to an audience question. We'll start over here.
Hello.
Hello.
What was one of your favorite experiences in acting? Like, just made you so happy to be an actor?
That's interesting. And the answer is a little strange. Do you guys know who Charles Manson was? Well, they were looking all over Hollywood for somebody to play Charles Manson, and they couldn't find them. And then a casting director had me in, and I met the director, and he says, "I know you as a writer," because I had written something that he'd given to Marlon Brando, that I wanted Marlon Brando, and he was a close friend of Marlon Brando's. He says, "I don't know you as an actor," but he says, "I'll tell you what, I'll give you a chance. So study the script, come back, don't do a voice." There was something else he didn't want, and don't memorize any of the lines. But just come back and do it. Well, there was a documentary in theaters, and particularly in the drive-ins, at that very moment, about Charles Manson and the family. So we went to see that. I took a tape recorder with me, and I recorded all of Manson's words, and I took the time to memorize the lines. And I came back, and the director said, "Well, whenever you're," I said, "I need a second to get ready." He says, "Okay, whenever you're ready." And he started writing something, and I went into the character. And it was one of those extraordinary moments that an actor has, because he literally dropped the pen and stopped and looked up at me and said, "My God, that's Charles Manson. That's Charles Manson." Well, I was very pleased. I know I'm talking about a psychopathic murderer. But I just felt so good about the audition. And as you all know, who know Charles Manson, I didn't get to play the part. They had indeed exhausted the possibilities in Los Angeles, but there's still other actors in New York. And Elia Kazan, who was a brilliant director and one of the hottest directors in town in New York, he recommended the chap that played the part, and got a recommendation from Elia Kazan. That's pretty much, that's the end of the story. The footnote is that the actor was very good, and that made it all okay for me, because he was very good. If he hadn't been, I would have felt very insulted.
For the sake of the audience, I won't transmit the question telepathically, but with the 20th anniversary of Babylon 5 coming up, if you could drop one of those City Alpha earbuds into Mr. Scrivansky's ear for another Lost Tales DVD. Would you like to see a psych horror story in there? And if so, would Bester make another appearance?
Well, the 25th anniversary is coming up.
20th. 20th, sorry.
So when is that?
For Babylon 5, the
Yeah.
20th anniversary coming up?
Is it 2002 or
No.
22?
I was told it was this year.
What?
I was told it was this year, and
Oh, so you don't really know.
That's what I've been calculating from the day they first aired the first episode.
See, that's how ugly rumors spread. Actually, I got along very well with Joe, and he was supposed to do a spin-off series from Babylon 5, and they shot several episodes, and he wrote one for me. It was like the 8th or 9th episode. I got the script, I memorized the lines, and then the show was canceled. This was the spin-off series, and the story how it involved Bester was the telepath wars. We lost the telepath wars.
Yes.
And I'm on the run. And I'm on the run throughout space, and I land on a planet, and they're looking for somebody, and we make a bargain that I will tell them where this person is if they would give me a shuttlecraft, because I need some locomotion. And they didn't think I could do any harm with a shuttlecraft. So they gave me that. They caught the bad guy. And the last scene, as I go off in my shuttlecraft, is going through space, and then, however you want to envision it, you pan up and you see this huge mothership, and it says Psychor on it. So all my guys are in that ship. So the obvious implication is that we're not done, and that we're going to return. I thought it was a terrific idea, and I knew that he intended to continue to use the character. That's as far as I went with it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for being here today. Speaking of the Alfred Bester character arc, I actually have a couple questions for you, and I know you're not supposed to ask two, but too bad. So, so I just loved your portrayal of Bester. You clearly played him with so much glee, and it was clear you were having a very good time. Your line delivery and your comic timing was brilliant, I thought, and your portrayal of the character. My question is, there are 3 books that came out later that finished the character arc of Bester. Have you read them? Did you enjoy them? That's my first question.
You want an answer now, before I forget?
Yes.
I thought the first one ended with Bester being born, so there was not very much to do with Bester, so I didn't read it. I read the second and third one, and the second one just seemed to me like it was episodic. It was a series of little adventures that didn't really probe into the character very much. It was just, plot stories, just plot stories. The third one I thought was terrific. I really enjoyed that.
Yeah.
I thought they made him a little more vicious than I had seen him. But I thought it was a very well done story, and could have stood on its own as a story. So yeah, I like that.
Yeah. I really enjoyed the third one too. My second question, if it's too personal, you don't have to answer. I know that your father.
I'm straight. Yeah.
Fair enough. I know that that your father was harangued by the McCarthy hearings, or at
Right.
least, and I was not born at the time, but the McCarthy hearings in that era, whenever I read about them or hear about them, I find deeply angering, and I wonder if you harbor some of that same anger, and I'm just curious about that.
Absolutely. And since I was living through it, it was more than anger involved. There was a considerable amount of apprehension, because my father thought that we were all going to be put in camps, particularly anybody who had any association with the Communist Party. And my father, guys go out and they say, they meet a girl and they say, God, you're beautiful, and I sure like to know you better. My father would go out, and we'd be eating dinner, and there'd be some girls at the next table, and he'd say, what do you know about Marxist philosophy? And he'd go into a whole thing proselytizing the virtues of communism. So he was very outspoken about it. I don't tend to say, I don't know if he was a card-carrying member, but he went to a lot of meetings, and he was supporting Henry Wallace, and who had been a Republican vice presidential candidate, and then switched to this American Progressive Party, which was sort of a facade for the Communist Party. And so he certainly convinced me that we were going to have a lot of trouble. In fact, the FBI did come to our apartment house and interviewed everybody in the apartment house about us to see how subversive were we, were we worth being hauled in. And ultimately, I guess they said no, because we managed to continue as we were. But you know that the Crucible is a reaction to what was happening with McCarthyism. Everybody was pointing to somebody and saying, he's a commie, he's pink. And that's what was happening with all those little girls pointing the witches out. And Arthur Miller's The Crucible was, in fact, a reaction to a story that Elia Kazan directed. I told you that brilliant director, called On the Waterfront. And On the Waterfront, it's Marlon Brando. And if you haven't seen it, you should. It's one of the great movies. And On the Waterfront, Brando is the guy that tells on the bad guys. And On the Waterfront, the guys you're pointing the finger at are the bad guys. In The Crucible, the person they're pointing the finger at is innocent, So the little girls are accusing the guy of being a witch, and the other, the good guy, the good union man, was pointing at all the bosses and saying they were bad. So, and Miller and Kazan had been great friends up until that point. They subsequently became friends again. But that was an interesting period, and to live through it and to experience that it was certainly significant for me, particularly since my father talked about it all the time. I mean, he just had no conscience about saying that he was a commie, when everybody else was really virulently anti-communist. That's why I guess I have never been an activist. I have a knee-jerk party reaction. I pretty much vote the liberal end of the Democratic Party. My son was the activist. He tied himself to a tree. We went to Burma, he and I, to film and interview the Burmese people about the atrocities that were taking place with that government. And he filmed it, and when we came back, there was a Rose Parade, and the Chinese were marching in the Rose Parade. And one of the parties that everybody was targeting for sort of supporting this militaristic government were the Chinese. And my son took a sign and he stood in front of the marching band and let them arrest him. So that was it skipped a generation. And I was very proud of him for that. He was only in jail for about 6 hours, but God, I'm really wandering. That's what happens when you hit 76,
Thank you.
Hi, Walter.
Yeah.
It's great to get to talk to you. I have a comment and a question. For one, I really liked the wig that you wore on the first episode of Star Trek. That was super cute. But yeah, the little beetle wig.
Oh,
But,
yeah. Oh, yeah.
But back in the day, there was a show called Craft Suspense Theater, and James Caan it was an anthology, and James Caan played a guy going undercover to write a magazine article about gangs in New York, and you played this badass gang member. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about how you got involved in that, and if there was any kind of gang research or whatever. It was awesome.
Yeah. It was called the Alfred Hitchcock Hour.
Craft Suspense Theater.
No, well, they must have changed it because at the time it was the Alfred Hitchcock Hour. Good evening. You know, he'd come out and then we'd shoot it. Harlan Ellison wrote it, and he wrote the initial short story, and it was in a collection of his short stories. And then he wrote a version of the teleplay, and he was a very obdurate and pugnacious person with a great deal of commitment to his own work. And when it was rewritten by Gene Roddenberry, it began a feud that never was reconciled between Harlan and Gene. That was a fun part to do. It was fun working with Jimmy because we'd gone to school together. So I don't know, what was the question? What was it like to do?
Playing a gang type, and all the... It was supposed to be really scary, but by today's standards, you guys look really like West Side Story.
Like what?
I mean, it wasn't really... I mean, you guys weren't all so frightening, but, I mean, at the time, you guys were pretty menacing.
Okay, I'll accept that. Yeah, it was fun to do. I've done several different bad guys. Not one, with a New York accent and a club jacket, but I did a bad guy and I Spy and there's a couple of other places as well. And the first show I did out here was an afternoon show called not Youth Court, Day in Court. It was called Day in Court, and it was about they had a judge, a real judge, who had the script in front of him, and the other people were actors, and they gave us about a day and a half to memorize it, and then they had us come in, and the rehearsal before we shot it was in the morning for 2 hours, and the director's responsibility ultimately was simply to change the dialogue from page 4 to page 8 to page 12. Drove us absolutely crazy because it was hard to remember this much dialogue to begin with, and then they juxtaposed it in such a way that you couldn't remember when you're supposed to say what. But I played this character called Irving the Dope. And as a result of that, and this guy was kind of dumb, and he was part of a gang. As a result of that, I did 4 or 5 or 6 more of them.
Really?
Yeah. So that was my main sustenance professionally for a while.
That was your niche.
Yeah, for a while, yeah. Until I got to play the Swedish businessman and give a slap on.
Were you on Gidget?
Yeah, I did.
That was awesome too.
Yeah, I did.
All right, let's.
And that's where I got to give this very pretty girl a tap on the behind. But it was kind of a slow motion tap. It was.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay.
Good afternoon.
Hi.
I just wanted to say you were the guest at my very first Star Trek convention that I went to, and I'm really very I have a lot of very good memories about that. And I was wondering if you have a favorite moment meeting a fan.
Meeting the fans. I'm sure I have many. I have many memorable moments. Not all of them are favorite, but I have memorable moments. This is really particular to this young lady. It is not meant to be, interpreted as a general statement about fans, because I love fans and I've had terrific experiences. But this young lady would come to the convention dressed in a cape, boxer shorts, sweats, and the tip of her nose blackened. And then when the costume parade went on, she would do a dance, and the dance was, and the music was fully orchestrated, it was obviously meant for something else. And so, and she goes, and that was the dance. And I missed it the first couple of times. I avoided going to the parade. But finally, she cornered me and said, "You've got to come see me do this. It's very important." The best part of the story is when she introduced herself to me, I said, "Who are you supposed to be?" Yeah. And she said, "Who am I supposed to be?" Like it was the most obvious question in the world. It's like she had a sign across her chest. She says, "I am an underdog." I said, you're supposed to be underdog? And she says, "I'm not supposed to be underdog. I am underdog." And I said, "You're so serious. Isn't that supposed to be kind of a funny cartoon?" And a very telling answer, "My father told me never to laugh at anything." So she was a little cuckoo, and but I finally went to see her. I finally went to see her as underdog. She takes out the tape recorder and turns on the music. Da 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 da. And underdog is, "Oh no no, I'm wrong. I saw her as underdog. I accepted that. Amen. Praise the Lord. I accepted that she was underdog." The next convention, she came out as a princess, with a tiara and the whole thing. It was very elaborate, and she told me that she does another dance, and that I should come to see this one. Well, curiosity is an amazing thing. So you know where this is leading. It's already blew away. I blew the punchline, but she turned it on, and all this, music and, it's a full orchestra, and she does the same freaking dance, And one of my greatest acting performances, at least moments in the theater, one that really speaks to my talent and my creativity and my gift as an actor. She asked me how I liked it, and I said, "I thought it was great."
Thank you.
Okay, not a single website has ever answered this question for me, so I have to wonder. When Wrath of Khan came out, in Poland, I think it was, the poster for Wrath of Khan was literally just one picture of Chekhov. That was it. That was it. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, I know. Star Trek II, Wrath of Khan, and just a picture of your face. That was the poster, and I was wondering,
Where was it from? St. Petersburg?
It was just like a commercial glamour shot of Chekhov from a promo, and that was the
never saw
entire
it.
poster on a black background. And I was wondering, obviously, you've never heard of it, I suppose. But so, my second question was if you own it. But
No, I've never heard of it. I never saw it.
Yeah, that was the Polish poster for it.
Oh, Polish.
Yes, that's what I was saying. Yeah, in Poland, that was the poster for Wrath of Khan.
Okay. Well, that makes sense. So, you know, I used to get some criticism about the accent, but it was on a different basis than it is now. Now it just, everybody says it's overblown, it's exaggerated. Well, my father happened to speak that way, and I trust that I was imitating him pretty well. In those days, I'd get people saying, particularly college students who were taking Russian as a language, they would say, Russians don't speak that way. There's no W in the Russian language. And I tried to explain that there's an inversion, that people would substitute the V for a W. And so their German dialects, well, they do the same thing. The W is there instead of the V. And I tried to explain that to people. But they were so, you know, into their studies, and they thought they were catching me at something. And I got a little jumpy about it. I got a little hostile. And I remember one day these two girls came up to me at a convention, and they say, "Oh, Mr. Koenig, I just want to tell you how wonderful your accent is, how wonderful your performance is. We just think." I said, "Okay, you don't like the performance? Don't imitate me. Don't make fun of me." And they said, "What are you talking about? We're here from Russia. This is the way we talk."
Thank you.
Folks, we're out of time, but I hope you'll help me in sending Walter off with a big Emerald City Comic Con welcome.
I've seen the lights of Megaton. I shut it off, I turn it off. And I'm wrong, they worship down the night of nothing. I got the skills to keep me out of danger. Would you believe it that I almost drowned while crossing a bridge and shot out by some raiders? You know they're making it hard for me. And in a world gone mad, I gotta believe there's something better, like a tidal wave that grows this is my life. Monday comes, fly to the savage land.